Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are exploring the question of how to format data sets and how to make themes for presenting different kinds of information in data sets. So the basic concept here is to use themes like we do in plots, right? Now, just to remind me how plot themes work. So plot themes are specific to different kinds of plots, right? So if I do this and I say plot theme, right, can somebody speak to this, please?
I mean, in general, the themes are pretty universal across the plots.
Okay.
I mean, what they do may differ, but the general set is the same. I mean, there's a few special cases like the one for getting thick surfaces from the 3D plots that are more specific, but...
Okay, so now here, when we look at plot theme, why isn't this mousing over correctly? Something is wrong there. Shouldn't be mousing over. Could you report that as a UX problem? When I'm in the middle of this thing, mousing over here, it should, for an option, it should come up in some way.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it doesn't. That's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for plot theme here, there are many specific types of directives, right? Now, presumably, Chris, you've looked at these for data sets, presumably.
Yeah.
Have you? So do you have proposals for what these analogous things like full axes and so on should be for data sets?
No, I thought that was what this meeting was for, is to decide what kinds of things we need.
I see. All right, okay. So you don't have any proposals for this? So, I mean,
other than the ideas that I threw out in this example notebook, no.
Okay, so what we need first is, okay, so here, let's see. Okay, so there are different categories of thing here. So is this a TIM production, basically, the stuff that's in here? Where did all this get worked on?
Yes, it is. At the top, you got the base themes. Those we use on everything.
Okay.
And then everything below that, they're like feature themes.
Okay.
And those are like function dependent, depending.
Okay. All right. Fine. Yeah. Okay. So then, for example, things like thick lines, stuff like that, we'll definitely have on data sets, right? Because you can control that, can't you, Chris?
There's not yet a frame option to control frame styling, no.
Okay. All right. So let's start making a list here of what we want. Let's see. Do I have a folder here? Yes, I do, for data set. Okay, so what we're going to want, I think, is, so let's, I mean, what are the elements of a data set? There's things like, there's background colors, there's fonts, there's sizes of things, sizes of fonts, sizes of cells, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Okay. There's
dividers.
Yes. Okay. There's also, in terms of content, there's elision of content, and there's things about
alignment.
Yes, definitely alignment. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that also goes with grids and so on. But let me understand something else. I mean, so what we're going to do for the time being, we're probably going to have a data set theme arrow option. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is, I mean, eventually we're going to have a general theme option. Okay, all right, fine.
So there's also a basic distinction between headers and content.
I'm wondering whether we should imagine having a grid theme option that, well, okay, well, whatever. Sorry, go ahead. You were saying something.
There's a basic distinction between headers and content, which often will be reflected in the theme.
I'm sorry?
Styling styling the headers differently than the content, for example, or giving them different background. I mean, that's a basic aspect of data setting.
Right. So I mean, background colors for content and headers, but there's also much more elaborate things about alternating rows and things like this, alternating columns, different background colors for different columns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make themes that are going to work somewhat more generally. Right? Okay, so then...
Does Dataset do any special formatting of items, like, does it ever change how a date object is displayed?
Yep.
Yeah, so content formatting is an issue there. Okay.
Why don't you just do options of dataset to see all the options?
Well, that's cheating.
No, I want to. Let's not waste our time. Okay. Okay, so header background is going to be a color, right?
Yeah.
Header display function, what's that?
You can intervene and tell it how to format a header.
So in other words, you can say how the content should be processed.
Right, like framed of hash or something.
Okay. Okay, header size.
That's just, that's like the item size, except for headers.
I see. An item size is then a maximum. It's got up tos and things like that in it. Is that right?
No, it's just numeric.
But it should have up to. It should allow up to, right?
Is up to used in that way? I mean, there is a syntax. I think I'd have to look at grid. There's a syntax where I think you can give it 2 items.
Yes, I'm not sure that up to has been properly installed in item size. That should be looked at.
I don't think it is.
Mm-hmm. But that should be looked at. Okay, so let's take a look at a few other things here. So Sandra on our live stream is asking about an image size type option for the whole data set. Do you understand the question?
Yeah. There isn't one currently,
But so what it's doing is it's shrink wrapping to the content.
Yeah.
Correct? Does grid always do that, or does grid have a way of giving an overall size that can then be distributed down to the content?
I don't believe it does. You can just specify individual.
Okay. So I do think that would be useful, because if you're making some document and you have multiple tables, it will be nice to have them all kind of, well, I'm not sure if that would work, because maybe their headers won't align and so on. I mean, this is the same problem we have with plots. If you want to have multiple data sets, let's think about that for a second here, right? You've got multiple data sets and they're different sized content, but you want the rows and columns to agree. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So an optimal thing to do would be to be able to take, be able to interrogate a data set and ask it for its kind of design parameters, so you can then feed it to another data set. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. No. You need to get hold of its what the effective item size is.
Well, you need to get absolute options, basically, of the thing. Do we have anything like that for graphics, where you can inherit? I mean, because that would have been, in terms of the way that you're doing multi-panel plots, which I still find really kind of unusable, and I've never used it. That's an alternative way to think about multi-panel plots, is to be able to interrogate a plot for its display parameters and then feed that to another plot. Did you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we have any way to do that?
I mean, right now it's done internally as, that's what like graphics grid does. is it looks at what the image padding is and that sort of thing.
Okay,
and
so fine. But
unifies
so
them.
one of the things we might consider doing, maybe we could write a function repository item to do it to begin with, is something that interrogates a plot and feeds it to another plot. In other words, basically the concept is something like, just like we have conform audio and so on, it'd be a conform graphics type thing.
Right.
Maybe that's a good function repository thing to begin with. Okay, but let's go back here. Okay, data split display panel. What is that?
That tells you the initial drill down point.
What does that mean?
If you click a header, it drills down to that header, and you can specify a path here, dataset display panel, which gives you the initial path as if you had clicked on a header.
I see. So that's the initial state.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the kind of thing that we should have in. That doesn't seem like the right kind of thing to have in the theme.
No, I agree. I don't even think it should be documented. It was
Being
for
able to do that programmatically may be useful in cases.
Yes, but again, it's an inheritance thing. Like I've got this data set in this state. I want to keep it in that state. I want to. I can also imagine somebody animating through that, right? Would that work? An animate?
I don't see why not.
Well, try it. It would be a good demo to animate through showing different pieces of a data set. How is it specified, the right-hand side?
It's just the path. I mean, if you hover over a dataset header, you'll see the path annotation underneath it. That's the argument you give.
I'm not seeing that. Header? Well, I was looking at content here. Why doesn't this work? Is this a bitmap?
No. Right.
By the way, in a data set for let me show you something. If I go something like oops, why is this not typing? Help. Why did that select there? That was totally wrong. Did you see that?
It's reported.
Oh boy, too many values. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now I click this. What am I seeing there in the footer? That's not really the name of that row, is it?
That's the path to that thing.
Really?
Yeah.
So how do I get that path?
Right click on that header, copy position.
So you're telling me if I type that in, no, it's not the path. That's the path. What are you showing down there?
Probably the common name.
Well, it's the.
But it isn't the path. You told me it was the path. It's not the path.
Well, it's the path using datasets formatting for things. It has special formatting for entity things.
It's pretty confusing. I mean, I wonder what we can do. Maybe we need something on hover here. Hey, do we have Noah here? He might have opinions about this. Maybe we need something on hover that is a way to, I mean, I do not like right-click stuff. It's not very discoverable.
I mean, I suppose when you hover over the item, you could have like a small sort of drop-down arrow that appears.
I don't see why not. It doesn't seem harmful because, I mean, it's like you're just reading this data set. If you're reading the data set, that's what I would suggest, that we expose the copy more obviously there. Am I making sense?
I don't think we have the technology to support a hover menu that you can choose from, if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, I'd be happy to begin with just a copy. Okay, we can talk about a hover menu, but we could feed that idea into the front end team. But for the time being, we could just have essentially a click to copy.
Could it not be done with an attached cell? Because you could just sort of put whatever you wanted in it then.
In the local.
Can we attach a cell on hover, or does it have to be a click, Noah?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Okay.
No, I meant the little arrow that appears, that is on hover. If you click on that. Then
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple of comments on our live stream that are interesting. One is asking for angled labels here. Do we have any way of doing that?
What's meant by angled?
Tip them.
Oh, I see. Rotated.
Yeah.
Sure, you can give an item display function.
Should we try it?
And rotate it. There's probably, though, there's a bug where it doesn't properly account for the change size. If the size.
Well, okay, but let's try it anyway.
Yeah.
So in this case here, we would say what?
Header display function, arrow.
Arrow what? Rotate.
Yeah.
Hash 45 degrees.
Yeah.
I'll be so happy when we have this hovering mechanism to let me automatically add that parenthesis whatever thing. Ta-da! Nice. Well, okay.
So is there a way to do it for only the column headers?
Yeah.
How do I do that?
Wrap a list around that right-hand side, make the first element automatic.
Ta-da! Nice. Now, what if I wanted to do it down another level here?
Add another automatic. That's actually down 2 levels there. So you'd add two automatics.
No, but I want to do it. Well, okay, but fine. But this is useful, and this is something that we should have. That is one of the kind of stories down here. Okay, so one of the items, let's see, where is it? Content, wait a minute. Oh, content and headers, wait a minute. How to display, well, okay, so this is features, right? So a feature probably wants to be rotated column labels. I don't know whether that's the right name for it, but that's the concept. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a feature that you might have or not have. And I think then we want to say, I mean, it's both rotated column labels and there's vertical column labels. Oops.
I think with our current technology, vertical is the only interesting case.
I don't know about that.
I mean, because so normally when you do rotate it like a 45-degree angle, I think, then that when it goes off at the angle, it's allowed to sort of cross over into the next column.
Okay, whatever. That's a detail about this.
Okay.
Let's not get into that.
Yep.
Okay. Ethan on our live stream is saying, forget dataset themes, do notebook themes. I thought that's what we had style sheets for. And how does this respond to the style sheet?
Themes, there's a mechanism in plot themes to use styles.
From the style sheet?
Yeah.
So if I go to dark mode, Tim, maybe you can speak to that. I mean, if I go to dark mode, will my plots correctly adapt?
I mean, a clearer example is if you were to have like a Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition notebook.
No, but I want to know the answer to that question. If I go to dark mode, do my plots adapt?
I don't think for dark mode that wasn't one of the original style sheets.
Well, but that's not what I'm asking. I mean, I'm asking if it picks things up from a style sheet, it should work when a new style sheet is added, right?
I mean, so there are some things like, tick labels and axis style and whatnot that, it will pick up from the style sheet. But there's also cases where at the time that it generates the plot, it knows what the notebook style sheet is and may choose, say, different line colors. for the main
I understand,
plot.
but then it's cooked its goose at that point.
Right. At that point, it's cooked.
Right. Okay. But that's okay. I mean, that's still fine and useful. Okay, there's a question here. Okay, with data set, you have a data set with certain plots as values. Would a plot theme argument to data set affect plots as well? Interesting.
Presumably not, because the plot's going to be generated before. I mean, you ever know you're in the data set.
Dataset has its own formatting for plots. You'd have to intervene with an item display function.
But so then maybe there's a plot theme. Maybe there are options like plot theme that should be possible for the dataset as a whole that could auto intervene, if you understand what I'm saying. In other words, options that get passed down. I mean, I think that is a reasonable possibility. Pass down.
Wouldn't that that would be like plot options, arrow, plot theme, something.
I mean, but dataset doesn't hold its arguments.
Well, so what is Chris talking about the reformatting of graphics? He's talking about that the graphics object, you've got the graphics object, right? Maybe it isn't a plot theme, but you've got the graphics object. Okay, so maybe that's wrong, but you need to have various kinds of theme level options for what to do that are analogous to plot theme, for what to do at the graphics level with the graphics. Am I making sense?
I mean, I think there probably are some things that can be done. Like, I'm guessing Chris means that he's setting image size of
right.
either explicitly or implicitly.
Hey, listen, we've got limited time here, so let's okay. So we all agree that fonts, background, etc. I do think that the styles that we have, business, detailed, marketing, minimal, monochrome, let's try and see whether we can channel those styles for dataset, those themes rather for dataset. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think they're silly to try to emulate. I mean, I'm not sure what else. They seem like reasonably good distinctions to me. I'm
in favor of that, of having that standard set, and then the feature themes, the more specific feature sub theme things that they that follow
right.
that are going to vary.
So roughly what we're going to be doing in like in business, for example, it's probably brighter colors, less detail, maybe bolder. I don't know. I mean, whatever Tim has done for plots probably makes sense here as well.
And we added dark mode. I mean, dark mode isn't part of common, but marketing kind of looks dark mode, but it's really not the intent of marketing. I feel like we should have a proper just dark mode.
Fine.
Added to common.
That is default. Yeah, that's default dark mode. Default styling, but dark mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the analogy to classic, but it's dark mode, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Tim, does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. So let's go now with what we're now going to be mostly talking about then. Given that overall picture, we're talking about, so for example, let's talk about some of the featureoids that we could imagine here. So let's say, here we would say alternating row colors is probably a featureoid, right?
Right.
Which, is relevant for some things and not for others. Okay, now, I mean, also probably alternating column colors. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, and that presumably needs to be done if we have a hierarchical thing. We'll have to pick different colors as we go down. Does that make sense to people? Like, I think these are reasonable for the top level. Go ahead.
The option or the name would probably just be alternating colors, because I mean you can specify a theme for a given level of a data set and you don't know a priori if it's rows or columns. It would just be alternating color theme.
No, but well, okay, but I mean,
I mean, but you're going to want to be able to set it at the top level.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is.
I think you want row and column as separate themes.
No, you don't
Yeah.
know if it's. You don't necessarily know if it's row or column.
I
Let's say
understand
you
what you're saying,
specify
but
you specify this for the third level of a data set.
I don't care. Look. I get what you're saying, Chris. The fact is that if somebody knows that they have a grid, I think it's useful to be able to say alternating column colors. If you don't have columns, if you have a data set that only has rows, nothing alternates in that case.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Ethan is suggesting a sub option for dark mode versions of each of our things. I'm not sure how necessary that is. Because I think some of them we definitely don't want dark mode. Like scientific, we do not want dark mode for that. That's for people putting things in scientific papers. When I see a dark mode scientific paper, we'll get interested in dark mode for scientific. Okay, so let's go down and look. Okay, so that's one type of thing. Another thing, which we're not seeing here, but I assume it's possible, is different colors for different levels of header.
Sure.
And I think that should probably be, I don't know whether that should be the default. So let's say, let's see, varying header colors. I don't know, that's not a very good name, but different header, well, no, it's not really colors, header backgrounds, varying header backgrounds. Actually, this should also be backgrounds here, right? Because that's what it is. Row colors will be the actual color of the content, right?
Right.
Which is another thing we might want. Okay. Now, okay, so alternating is one thing. And I mean, you could get very cutesy and have alternating not on off, but I don't think we care about that. I don't think that needs to be a feature that we specify in this kind of bank switch feature specification. So I don't know whether varying is not the right term, but what would be the right term for that? I mean, and just so we're clear, there are these headers, there are these headers. I don't know whether we want to distinguish those colors, and there are definitely these headers here. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I mean, there could be a color. Is that something one wants? A color for the row headers, a column for the column headers that are different?
I mean, you can try it out. Header, background, arrow, a list of colors.
That's quite nice. That's quite nice. I like that idea to have basically something which goes through a color map. Jeremy, Tim, etc., going through a color map as you go down levels. Now these content areas, they're also at different levels, right?
Yeah. You can do the same thing with just background.
Okay, I think it's going to get too weird with that. I don't know. Designers, comments about this, please.
I think there's a case for this. What happened to the color with mass and radius there? It looks like it injected it.
Oh, it didn't have
It's
a
just
color.
a default
It's just
color.
a gray. Okay, fine. So is there something that cycles or?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be a cycle. It's a drill down. We're going deeper, 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 deeper.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you can make a cyclic. If you just give it put light orange and light green in a list.
No, I understand.
Then
We can
it'll
make
cycle.
it, but I'm not sure it should be cyclic. I mean, that's the question of whether it's, cyclic, or continuing to be different. I think continuing to be different. I think this is a case where it's just like you don't even know that it's a deeper thing unless you get what I'm saying. I don't know how we indicate depth. I mean, it's similar to the problem when we're, if we were coloring parentheses in an expression, we've never succeeded in figuring out a good way to do that. But here, at least visually, you can maybe connect things. I'm not sure whether there's a logic to how the colors go as you drill further down, if I'm making sense. And whether it's just random colors or whether there's some, I think it can just be random colors, because by the time you're at 7 levels of drilling, that's a very exotic situation.
In plot themes, there is some way of effectively making that parametric, right? I mean, you would presumably want to specify not only varying colors, but what the color set is.
Sure, that's just a color data object.
Right.
But what's the syntax for getting that into a plot theme?
It's one of the method options.
Yeah, I mean, plot themes are preset, and that's what we're trying to do here as well. They're not particular. If you want user modifiable stuff, use the underlying options. Start from the idea is start from the plot theme, and then you can overwrite it with specific options, and that's the way to do this. Right? We're not trying to give people, infinite control there. If they want infinite control, use the actual raw option.
Right. But am I wrong about that? Are there no effectively parametric plot themes?
I believe there are not. What's that?
I don't think so.
There are some parametric plot themes.
Well, here, look,
background is one of them, but it's not documented.
Color
features. Oh, no, it is there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you can give the explicit background color, but these are ones where you're specifying a color scheme, right, for the plot, and this is a limited number of colors schemes, and we should have the same type of thing for dataset. Whether it's the exact same color choices, it'd be nice if it was, but I don't know if it will make sense.
Right. I mean, like bold color for you. Well, okay, let's skip bold color, but like cool color would probably be, maybe more pastel versions of those.
Right. I think this makes sense to try. Okay. Yeah, this is sensible. This labels thing, that's perfectly sensible here. This is interesting. This is I mean, clearly you can change the grid lines here, right?
There's not yet an option for changing the grid lines.
Okay, all right. But then for the future, it's like grid lines, and then that's things like dotted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, dotted colors, et cetera. So you can't even change the colors of the grid lines yet?
No.
Okay. Okay, so now there are things like, are you in a position, I mean, like the overall border, how is that specified?
You mean that outer frame?
The outer border, that's what I'm asking about.
It's fixed.
Okay. So we might want an appearance option in general for that, if we know what else we're allowing. That making sense? Because I mean, some of these things like dark mode will clearly not work unless we have some way to reset that.
I would be
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I'd be apprehensive about playing with the actual UX elements too much. You sort of want them to be roughly consistent, I guess.
Okay. That's a reasonable claim. I mean, the only problem is if you're trying to print this in a paper and it's got all kinds of, interactive UX crud around it, that's probably the wrong thing. Right. So, I mean, there's a case, and I don't know what this does when you print it, or when you export it. But I think there are definitely cases. I mean, we probably want, borderless or something for printing. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do we have an option that will, sort of turn off the elision? So you just see the big full table all at once?
Yes, it's not yet in this version, but I'm working on that. Well, I mean, now you can do it now using max items
Okay,
in
but
this,
no
in
elision.
this case.
I mean, the i.e. C full table.
Right, which is just max items infinity.
Right. Noah, you were going to say something.
Well, I mean, if you're actually printing it out, do you need the outer?
No, you don't. That's my point. But I mean, I think you might want to see in the actual printing, you shouldn't do it by default. But I'm saying that you might want a style here where it is as if printed, so to speak.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so let's look at some of the more elaborate issues of
So
go ahead.
well, one thing that's not on your list is interactive behaviors, like, for example, tooltips. Is that something that you would want to put in a theme?
Sure. What are the interactive behaviors one might have?
Well, you can do anything. I mean, you can give an item display function that wraps it with tooltip or annotation or whatever.
Well, so the thing that one might imagine is right now that's just telling me the position here. Is there anything else we could usefully have in that tooltip? I don't know, by default.
Wait, what do you call? Are you calling the annotation underneath the tooltip?
I'm calling the annotation underneath it. Well, it's the path, right?
Yeah, but I was talking about actual tooltips when you hover over an item.
That's what I'm looking at. Yeah, I'm talking about a tooltip that would show up near the item, right, as opposed to in the footer.
Right.
But the question is there something generically useful there? The only thing generically useful that I can imagine is something about the input form.
Well, for example, you could imagine like magnified. If you have a very small condensed table, you would want to make a tooltip that magnifies the item.
I see. Well, actually, I can see something which, if it's elided, the tooltip by default should show you the full thing. That seems like a good feature in general.
Could.
Yeah. Right? Why not? Or at least shows you a bigger piece of the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is tooltip to show magnified form of elided data. There's also tooltip to show bigger versions of graphics, which might also be a useful thing almost in general.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've got comments from Ben here. He's not a fan of how the column scroll bar is implemented. With a data set that has lots of columns, it's a pain to have to scroll the page to see content, only to realize you have to scroll back to adjust the column scroll bar to show more. What is that about? That sounds like a UX bug. By the way, did we... Okay. Okay. I mean Chris, do you understand what?
No, I don't. Are you scrolling back for what reason?
Okay, let's make a data set with a bunch of columns, okay? So how do we do that? We just say table, we just say like...
it's gonna, it's not easy to do because it'll, for easy data sets, it'll just elide the wide columns.
What do you mean?
Well, go ahead and try one. I mean, if you just give like a big identity matrix,
okay,
it'll elide each row will be an elision of columns.
That's useless. How do I show that full? How do I show that without elision? There must be an option to show it without elision.
Yeah. Give some data set max items arrow infinity.
Oh, come on.
That didn't do it.
Why didn't that work?
Well, that's another bug that I'm working on because some decisions are made effectively too early.
Okay, so
and I can't undo them. I mean, that's the code that I inherited.
Okay. All right. So this is. So wait a minute. What happened here? That's not 40 columns. How do I scroll
No,
over?
it is a multi-column display. It wrapped it for you.
Oh, I see. Okay, but so is there a horizontal scroll bar?
Yes, there is. I'm trying to think of a, there's no example data set or anything. There's no easy way to get at it.
Maybe
You need a data set with homogeneous content that's very wide.
Scroll bar is hard to use, hard to see, and not smooth. Well, we're talking about this scroll bar here. It's weird that as you move the scroll bar, the height changes. Right?
Well, it more or less has to work that way. Otherwise, you'd have to
have partial columns.
You
partial rows, right? I mean, it's because the row heights are different. It's scrolling
because the
by
row heights
rows.
are different.
Yeah, I understand. It's scrolling by rows. It's not scrolling by content size. Okay. And I mean, is that the right thing in why does this not extend to the bottom here?
Because the data set doesn't know what size it is. It's estimating the size.
Okay, so what happened here? I just clicked that. That's obviously a bug, right? If I click that down...
That's been fixed.
Okay, I click the down arrow. I better be able to click on that down arrow at the same, continue to click on that down arrow.
Yeah.
Do we want it to be the case that as you hover on the toolbar, on the scroll bar, that the scroll bar becomes darker in color? Seems like a good thing, so that you're highlighting it, right? So you know you're going to do something with it. So it's not like it's a dead animal type thing. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea from a UX point of view. Right. So as you hover over it, it darkens to indicate that it's active, and then you can scroll with it. Is that cursor, the double arrow cursor? Is that? I mean, it's definitely not what I would expect to see here, right? Here I just see an arrow cursor, right?
Yeah.
So that seems like it's a wrong cursor, right? And it would be better to just highlight as you hover over the toolbar, over the scroll bar.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think that actually would be a very good idea. It would really help understand what's going on there. I also wonder whether in this footer, comments from Jeremy or Noah or somebody about this. I mean, should this footer light up before you actually hit the specific item within the footer?
I think the fact that the buttons themselves change when you hover over them is sort of sufficiently obvious to know.
All right, okay. So here's another question. What about
tooltips? But maybe that's just me.
Yes, tooltips would be nice. Another thing is, if I go to this row, why not highlight the whole row? Why is this thing dead as a stone? I mean, why not, if I bother to put my mouse here, why not highlight the things in that row? Do you understand what I'm saying, Chris?
Yeah.
Is there an action to take in that case, or no action?
I don't think it needs to have an action. I think it's just, well, I mean, there's an action, which is that you click to, why isn't that clicking down? I don't understand. Why isn't that?
There's nothing to click. There's nothing to click down to.
Suggestion.
My concern would be, I mean, it would take a lot of machinery to highlight a row, and that's likely to bog down. I mean, these things.
Well, you're giving an implementation excuse. That's not what we're interested in. Okay. So what we're interested in is what the design should be. We worry later about whether it's implementable.
But UX-wise, it's that hover effects to me indicates a click event's going to happen, right? I mean, it's weird to hover without a click event attached to it.
Well,
why do you want it to highlight? So you can follow the row?
Yeah, so I can follow the row. Yeah, Sandra is pointing out that in spreadsheets, you typically click the header and it highlights the column. But that's also because you can then delete the column.
Right.
Yeah, there's actions
can't make selections. And
yeah.
All right, so that's a separate thing we should discuss separately, is what those hover effects and so on. But I want to get to some other things here. Okay. Let's talk about all of these kind of displaying content. Okay, so this is a type of issue, which is content, content-based styling. Okay, that's a topic. Whoops, I need to format that differently here, but that's the thing we need to talk about, right? You understand what I mean? Like this here.
Yeah.
Okay, so and those are probably features that we want to have, but how do you specify something like this? That is, you're specifying, oh wow, how does it auto scale this? Oh, it's not auto scale.
I was going to say, I think that syntax entirely wrong.
What's that?
I think that syntax is wrong.
What syntax?
Background goes to function, and the one below it that has like item style goes to function.
Why? What should it be?
I'm not sure, but I mean, like, as Steven says, you happen to pick data that is between 0 and 1.
Right. I mean, there's a color function scaling type issue, right? So this is like a color function. And then there's usually a color function scaling option, which determines whether it will auto scale for the range of the data or whether it's absolute.
Right. And also, it's the case that, like, if you were to copy out that pure function, the hue, through ampersand, and replace it by foo, where you say foo of a underscore equals hue of a, then it doesn't behave the same.
Why not? Why doesn't it behave the same?
I mean, presumably because it's looking to see if it has head function.
Oh,
on whether to try to generate colors or to use the thing directly as a color.
That's something that's a metaphor that we've used many other times, of value versus function. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned about how do you deal with the scaling issue. How do you deal, if I wanted to auto scale this for the range, right? In this case, I want to get the hue to not wrap around, but to be scaled down to the overall value, to the overall maximum value. How would I do that?
There's no good way to do it. I mean, other than calculating that beforehand.
Okay, but so that's exactly what color function scaling is about. I mean, okay, so what other things can you change the color of the borders around a particular cell? So for example, if I have a cell which is negative, can I make its borders be a different color? Okay, so you should be able to do that. So I mean, what we've got is something where we've got several different things here, right?
Speaking of which, negative values is probably one of those themes based on on your content-based styling.
What do you say? Yeah, right.
Negative values.
Right. Highlight negative values.
With a red font, for example.
Right, and different things would be okay.
Should there be something like accounting theme?
I don't know. Probably not. I mean,
don't they have standard ways, putting things in parentheses or whatever?
Yeah, but that's what we do with
accounting form. I mean, an accounting type theme isn't.
I'm
I don't
skeptical
think that's an
about the
awful
utility
idea.
of that one. Yeah, I think it's in the tail. But I do think that, okay, so, okay, we got a couple of issues here. So first point is, what can be styled, right? So it's the actual content, e.g. font. It's the background color, and it's the border. Well, and border, the actual border or an inner border. So I'm saying, let's say I wanted to put, I wanted to highlight particular elements here, right?
Yeah.
I might want to do that by having an inner frame here. I think that's more sensible than having the actual border be highlighted, because the actual border will, have contention with the neighboring cells and so on. Ben is saying he can send his example data set that causes trouble to us, and that would be great. Okay, so let's just inventory what kinds of things we might want to do here. So there's highlight negative values. There's heat map. There's some kind of heat map value. I don't know, heat map. I don't know how we say it, but basically heat map. This is weird. It's amusing.
I was trying to make a monochrome heat map, but you got to do something with the font to make it readable.
Fair enough. Well, okay, so that would be what heat map would do if you went to monochrome overall theme. If you were in monochrome overall theme.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is interesting. This is something where you actually don't have the values, right? Where the actual display is not even of the value itself. Am I making sense?
Right.
Whew. Is that really something that we want to support directly, or is that something that people?
I mean, you see that occasionally where it's it's usually done for a particular column or something.
Well, the other point is you can have the actual value in there, and you can have the background be, you can say something like, yeah, and by the way, these things like highlight negative values and things, you might indeed want that for a particular column.
Right, which the syntax allows you to do.
Okay, but so what you're proposing is that we be able to mix these theme specifications with the existing syntax, right?
Yep. So you can have several themes applying to different parts of the data set.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's good. So long as the syntax plays nice, which I don't immediately know. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because this is going to be, strings, lists of strings, all that kind of thing. That means that we can't have a list here meaning something other than the kind of level drill down that it means in the case of the overall syntax.
In general, if there's list ambiguity, the outer level of list is interpreted as the value, not as a list of values.
All right.
That's the way alignment works. That's the way item size works.
Okay, but so here we can imagine something where the background is one of these, and where the actual value is in there. I mean, we can still have the value even though there's a, we can say
you could put the value in there, or it could be in a tooltip.
All right, so we could call that value bar or something. Value bars. Not sure if that's the right name, but something like that. Again, I don't even know whether it's horizontal or vertical, but presumably most of the time horizontal. Let's see.
I put an example of this in chat.
Okay.
I mean, it's a more.
I'm going to say graphic only values. In other words, i.e., just make all the numbers, etc., into something graphical. I don't know if that's a good idea, but that's a possible overall theme idea. Let's see. So there's a question from Honor here. Can we auto-scale rows and columns of tables relative to header values? Oh, I see. Well, I mean, you're asking, yeah, right. I think that's an ornate possibility, that these relative values here, the question is that this is the analog of color function scaling for these bars, right? In other words, if a bar is such and such a number of pixels wide, does it mean the same number in this column as it does in this column? I think that's ornate, amusing, and certainly specifiable programmatically, but I don't think that's a default kind of thing to worry about. Probably is column relative. So that's another thing. Is make, I mean, this bad name, but make column iconography agree, i.e., e.g. scale colors are the same, etc. Because it's not obvious you want to do that. If you have a color function scaling thing, it could be by column or by row or by whole table. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, there's things that we're missing that are, sort of more common and obvious, and we're down in the weeds. So for example, all columns the same width or allow them to float. Same for the rows heights.
Yes. Okay. So that's a good point. Right. So what we're saying is here, equal width columns, equal height rows. That's a good point.
And then you have things like, how do I want to format dates? How many digits do I want to show on numbers?
Okay.
Am I using scientific form or blowing everything out to?
Well, that's right. So there's an issue there about, okay. Well, this is, okay, hold on. So we're not organizing this very well, but detailed content formatting. We've got issues like number precision. We've got issues like scientific notation. With dates, I'm not sure, okay, so date formatting, yeah, I guess that's right. There are different date formatting options that you might choose. Let's see, Sander is pointing out, could there be a highlighting method? In other words, but the question is how, if you highlight, how do you highlight things?
Does she mean highlighting on hover or highlighting to make, like, select a subrect?
No, I think that's an interesting question. No. I mean highlighting just generally. If you were to put something, if you put a generic wrapper, just like we have highlight graph, if there was a generic wrapper that indicated highlight these elements in the source here, I mean, there's a question of if we could have a generic item for highlighting, what would it, what would that be like? I don't know whether we want that. I mean, that's a question. Generic highlighting mechanism. Okay. All right. We are running out of time here. But I want to, I mean, and this is certainly not our last meeting. We're just getting started on this topic. Maybe we can pull together these various things we've talked about here. I mean, I think that in terms of content, yeah. Yeah, there's okay, so there's Hans on our live stream is pointing out about alignment, and yeah, I mean there's alignment on decimal points, etc. Various different alignment options. I mean, I really do think in this case here, like the number precision is an important issue because that's 0.20 is quite possibly what we want to use there. Someone was pointing out here that you know, whatever we do here should be also doable in you know, the grid should support these things. And yes, that is a future. I mean, I don't know in terms of what you're doing right now, Chris. When you add functionality here to the formatting of dataset, is that getting backported to grid or not?
No.
Okay, so that's a separate thing that has to be done. Okay, and also table view is another place where we should think about which of these things can be carried over. All right, well, what is that now? So that is a hover. That highlights, because when I click it, it goes to that, right?
Right.
But that is not clickable.
It is clickable.
It wasn't clickable. I go to moons. I hit the
Well,
moons.
you're already at moons.
Yeah, well, right. So that's not, okay, fine. Okay, another thing that should be parameterizable is how this works. How is the elision of these things working? I mean, okay, so I think
that's
there's a
controlled
general,
by max items.
right. So there's a general thing here, which we had. Where did we have this? We had something here that said no elision, i.e. seed full table. So what we want to do is we want to have something which says high elision or low elision. High elision of high elision, low elision, or something. Do you
Yeah,
get
so something that controls
Yeah.
you know, sort of the density of the elisions or something.
Boy, that's a bug. And look at that. There's a smart quote bug. Somebody should note that, please.
Got it.
You know, how aggressively are sub tables elided? Okay. All right. Okay, Ethan is suggesting a C more or C less. I mean, that's kind of what we have in the, oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying if we go here, wait a minute, why am I not seeing, oh, I see. If I have a longer table, right? If I go, yeah, just like we have in large output, right? There's a generic, that would be an attached cell type thing about, well, okay, so C more, C less. Where do we have a table that is big enough? Here we go. Here we go. So this is showing, I see. So the idea would be a UX element down here that simply says that's actually a good idea. That's a good idea. Rather than paging this, just expand it. That's a good idea.
You can right click the rows and there's a menu that gives you that.
I would never have known. Well, brilliant, but undiscoverable, utterly undiscoverable. That's nice, but give me a way to you know, give me an icon that pulls that up. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a plus sign, I don't know, more. I don't know, show. We don't want to see the words show more every time we see a table, but some kind of icon there would make sense to me. Maybe an expander, some kind of visual expander icon. Makes sense? Jeremy or somebody, do you?
But that makes sense if that's the only functionality. I mean, it could be a general purpose icon if there's other things we need to add to the menu.
Okay. Yes. Well, okay. So it could be a gear, or it could be a simply expander and contractor here. Right, where those potentially give you, once you know that there's expand and contract, I mean, honestly, once you have an expander icon, underneath it could be a contracting thing. All right, I think we have to wrap here because I've got to go to something else. I would, this is a good start.
So one scheduling issue, I'm leaving for PTO at the end of the week, and I'll be back in the end of September.
Well, we need to have some other meeting then, so somebody's got to fit it in. Okay. By the way, there's for people on the live stream, you might be interested at 4 p.m. Eastern today, there is another design review of something utterly different topic, biosequences, molecules that represent, well, yes, things like DNA. Okay, different topic. All right. Okay, so you
send me that. Somebody send me that notebook.
Yeah, who's going to do that?
Yeah, I can send it to you, Chris.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Good stuff. All right. Thanks to everybody here. Thanks to people on the live stream.